I couldn't speak till I was 3 years old. And my sister did all the talking for me. Good.
Well, thank you for taking the time to come here, because you're on a tight schedule, aren't you?
I'm in Tokyo. I live on my sailboat.
That's
and
beautiful.
I've been living on the boat for 4 years. The first 2 years was here at Shinkiba,
Okay.
at Yumenoshima Marina.
Right.
And then 2 years ago, I severed my contract and been sailing full-time since. And I'm currently in Amami Oshima.
Okay. But when you're in Shinkiba, when you started sailing your sailboat, that was your address?
No, it's not allowed. Yeah, legally, that's not allowed.
Oh, so it's not allowed in Japan.
So liveaboards are not allowed in Japan. You can't.
Period.
You can't, in terms of your official address.
Okay.
You can stay aboard, but you can't live aboard.
So what's the difference?
It's a legal difference.
Tell me
It can't be your address. So you have to have a land address.
So what did you use for land?
So we have a family home in Nagoya, on a mountainside outside Nagoya. My wife and I designed and built a log house, solar powered. That's her dream. We raised our boys in Nagoya. They're both graduates of Nagoya International School.
So you have two boys?
My wife's father was a founder of Nagoya International School.
Wait, we're going to get through to you first,
Okay,
Lowell. You're
okay.
trying to avoid you real quick. No, you're not taking me there. Wait. So tell me this, where were you born?
Okay, I've discerned that's your usual starting question. So I was born in an obscure little town called Eston in the province of Saskatchewan.
So you're
in
Canadian.
Canada. I'm a
Okay.
Canadian.
All right.
And the hospital burned down a couple weeks before I was born, so I was born in the town hall.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so did you have siblings? How many siblings do you
I
have?
have an older sister, her name is Faith, and a younger brother, Brent, 5 years younger, who's actually in the hotel room. He came for my son's wedding,
Okay.
and now he's going to fly down to Mommy with me tomorrow morning.
So
He's gonna wake me
your
in the
sister's
boat.
good? Your sister's okay?
Sister's good, yeah.
And your brother, obviously, he's okay.
And he's okay.
What about mom and dad?
And my father passed away just over 10 years ago, and my mother is now, she's 93, with full-on dementia.
Oh,
and
that's sad to hear.
but she went through a period where it was the phase of dementia and Alzheimer's, where she was paranoid, angry, but now she's on the blissful side,
Oh, that's
which
right.
is nice to see.
How long was that? That she was on the How long she had it?
Well, who knows when it started? You know, it's loss of memory, etc. But she was moved to the third floor now 3 years ago. So it's been 3 years since the doctors determined that she wasn't capable to live in a semi-independent. And like many others, and I'm not sure about your family back in the States, but perhaps similar, you know, she was basically locked up and locked down during pandemic. And went months without any touch or hug.
Come on.
Yeah, and in fact, I talked to her most days.
Okay.
And back then,
did she know who you were?
well, back then she did, and now it's occasionally she knows.
Okay.
And now I'm dependent on my sister being there, whereas back then I could phone her and she'd pick up the phone or we would Skype.
Mm-hmm.
And then this one conversation she said to me, as she was locked down, she said, have you had the virus? She asked me. I said, no, I haven't. And then she says, my TV has it. I said, your TV? I kind of chuckled. Yeah, it's just pouring out of my TV all day long. And then she says, sure, I'd like to kick the guy in the ass who invented this COVID. And I thought, well, I kind of agree with you.
She's right.
Yeah.
She's right. So let's get back. What type of child were you when you were growing up? Were you more academic or were you more sports-minded?
I was a middle child, so...
What does that have to do?
So-
Because you had a sister, but wait, how many years between you and your sister, first of all?
3, and then 5 to my brother.
Okay, so first of all, you just had a sister that was terrorizing you for a while.
Exactly. So I say I'm a middle child because they always remind me I'm the middle problem child.
Okay.
So I was the quiet one of the two. They were They
had personalities.
They had personalities. So I couldn't actually. I used to write books for a living, and I'm now. There's another book, My 10th book has been released in September after a multi-year hiatus with a British publisher. And I say that because as I was reflecting, the first part of the book, it's called Memoirs of a Misfit Dreamer.
You're talking about being a child.
And so as I was kind of digging deep and being pushed by the publisher somewhat to go deeper, I've written some things I've never talked about before. And one of them is I couldn't speak till I was 3 years old. And my sister did all the talking for me. Now,
Well, how did she know what you wanted to say?
she just made it up. It was just her way of controlling me. And I say that, with love and affection. But in hindsight, it kind of a retro diagnosis is I was mildly autistic. I had all the symptoms of that. So and it had to do with some motor skills were lacking and et cetera, et cetera. So I was the quiet one. I couldn't speak till I was 3. Actually, the day my sister started school, I spoke my first word, which was pop. And I was glad to see her go, which was pop. I wanted a drink of pop. The word was ish. And then for the longest time, I didn't pronounce S's. So I would say, instead of snake, I would say nake, or instead of snow, no. And then my sister says, no, you got to say snake, snow. So then I would go car, train. I just thought S appeared in everything. So I was quiet, but I was also, you learn to cope. I had reading difficulties even to this day. The more syllables a word has, the more I have to concentrate on visualizing that word like a graphitex flowing in front of my brain. But it made me, I think, reflective and thought a lot and had some dreams early on of what I wanted to do and of adventure. Fly airplanes,
What age are you
cross
talking
deserts.
Now? What age was this?
I was still in elementary school. I remember particularly a dream I had in my sleep. It was almost an epiphany that I wanted to travel the world and help people on the planet. And most of my adult life has been in the NGO world, the nonprofit world. Yes.
Okay, but let's get to there. Let's get there real quick. That's interesting. How you could. Most of your life has been in NGO world. You started in elementary school. Okay, so you had these problems. You weren't aware of them. You just knew that you're a quiet kid.
I was
diagnosed you.
I was diagnosed in grade 1 and put in a special class. And then my father, who was a minister, when he would move to different parishes, eventually they lost track of my records. So I always felt like the dumb kid in the class.
Well, so you moved a lot.
Yes.
So how often did you move? Let's say from first grade to sixth grade. How far would you?
Grade 1. Well, we moved locations within cities. Probably every couple of years I was in a different school growing up. Almost like a military kid, I guess.
So I guess it would be. Yeah. So you don't have any real close friends?
I do have close friends.
From elementary?
Not from elementary.
Mm-hmm.
In other kind of family networks and social networks, right. My parents are part of. I have.
But were both your mother and father? Let's say, did they have big families themselves, or come from big families? I mean, like
they're both back. Yeah, I think they're both in families of 6.
Okay. Yeah. And what kind of what religion?
He was a Protestant.
Protestant. Okay.
Pastor in Canada, and he was a farm boy. The first book I wrote had a whole section on my grandparents immigrating from England to Canada in the early 1900s, lured by the promise of free land.
Right. Okay.
And my father was the youngest of 6. When he was 3 years old, his father died, and their 6-bedroom house on the homestead, they become rather wealthy by then, the house burned down. And so he was actually raised in poverty. As the youngest, was always kind of mama's boy, et cetera, et cetera. And that family farm is still in the family. Yeah, my cousin owns it now.
But when it burned down, how did that make them grow up in poverty? No one came to help them build, or what?
Well, there was no insurance, and it was the house burning plus that my grandfather died.
Okay.
Right, so it left this single mom with 6 kids. Right. I think the oldest maybe had been, the 2 oldest were daughters, And then it was left to the 4 younger boys. But yeah, the neighbors all helped, but there was no insurance. There was no other,
right.
and they had a few hundred. I think they had 2 quarter sections. That's 160 acres each, or 120.
This is all up in Canada.
That's all in Saskatchewan, just north of
Montana.
Just an hour's north of the Montana border.
Wow! So you're really close to the States. You're right there.
We're right there.
You could step across. Yeah, a lot of places you could just step across. Nobody would say anything.
You can indeed. And people do.
I know they do. So tell me this, because I have a friend that lives in Montana. So when you were growing up, when you got into junior high school, did you grow up with a complex thinking you had a problem by any chance? Did that start to act as a stigma? You thought you were the dumbest? You said, no, you just said that. You said, when you went from town to town, you always felt like you were the dumbest kid there.
Yeah, it was kind of, again, I've only reflected on this in any serious way the last few months. It was kind of a split view of myself. On one hand, I felt a bit stupid compared to others. On the other hand, I couldn't figure out why it took some people such a long time to figure something out when the answer was obvious. So I could process information. And so I kind of eventually developed what I now would call my superpowers. I didn't call them that. We all have traits that we can leverage for success. So I kind of realized what I could do, and I could think. Thinking was important, and also perseverance.
Let me ask you this. Did you ever have a teacher or someone in your life that said, you know something, Lowell? You are ba, 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 and you went, yeah, and you believed it because of what they were telling you, how well adapted you were at being able to deal with people or different answers or anything like that?
Not growing up, except my mother, but she doesn't count.
Okay. So you knew she always felt that way.
No. So no, I was quiet and I thought a lot. So I was never the life of the party. But endurance became an important part of my life. So when I was 12 years old, we were living in Winnipeg, Manitoba. My father was the minister of a church, and they had announced at school they were going to have a Miles for Millions walk. It was going to raise money for the poor in Haiti. Haiti, of course, has chronic problems in terms of natural disasters and poverty. But I didn't even know where Haiti was, and it wasn't helping Haiti that attracted my attention. It was to walk 35 miles in one day, about 50 kilometers. Well, you're American, you know miles. Right. And so I thought, I wonder if I could do that. And so I signed up, and my best friend Doug signed up as well. And then I realized, I have to get sponsors, I have to get money as well. So I did. I met the financial goal of raising money, not for myself, but for Haiti. And I walked that 35 miles and I raised that money for Haiti. And that changed my life, because that was a big confidence booster.
At 12?
At age 12, 50 kilometers in one day. And so I've been fundraising ever since. I've been fundraising. I'm 68. I've been raising money since age 12, largely for the...
Do you know the place you came in?
It wasn't a race.
It wasn't a race.
And there was like...
It was just being able to do it.
There was 20 or 30,000 people.
Okay.
And it was...
But everyone didn't make it, obviously.
I suppose not.
Yeah, right.
And there were water stations along the way. You had to get stamped
to prove that you'd been there.
To prove there. And our house, my father's manse, the vicarage, was 4 miles from the finish line. And so of course, no mobile phones back then. It was pre-agreed. You know, when you get here, it was only literally 50 meters off the course, off the main road. Said, come in, we'll give you some supper or something. And I still remember coming in. We were feeling exhausted, of course.
I can imagine.
Feet were sore, blisters. Come in and sit. I can still picture in the kitchen table. And my mother, I don't remember what she cooked, but I remember what my father did.
What did he do?
And my father got on all fours, took off our shoes and socks. Of course, in Canada, you wear your shoes in your house, so he had them on, and he washed my feet.
And that blew your mind. That was
it blew my mind. Of course, being a minister, I understood the scriptural significance of it, and he did. So my dad had never served me before, and If anything, I had a cantankerous relationship with him as a, a young pubescent boy. And then he said, "We're so proud of you. You don't need to finish. You've done 31 miles. Like, you're 12 years old. You've done 31 miles, and so just stay home now." And I said, "Are you kidding?" Because now I felt refreshed.
Exactly.
And so back to your point about, was there anybody that ever encouraged you? Well, there are those moments.
That's what I'm talking about.
When somebody does something that revives you and refreshes you. So you never,
it helps to keep you on your path, I would like to say.
It keeps you on your path, and it keeps you moving forward on the path. So that then changed my life. It changed my perception of myself. I can do things, I can have adventures, I can meet challenges, and I can help others at the same time, have adventures with purpose. And that's what my life is. Okay. That's my raison d'etre in life.
So take me in through high school. You're at the end of high school. What were you studying really in high school? What were your interests in high school?
Always the humanities. And in fact, because my father had a year sabbatical where he taught at a theological school in San Antonio, Texas, I graduated from high school in San Antonio, not in Canada. And it was 1973, the year of Watergate.
That's right.
And my history class was the best class because we just watched TV. And the teacher, I forget his name, but he just, it was riveting. And I also the course in high school that's helped me most in life was a course I took there, typing.
Okay.
A typing class. J-U-J. I also took, bookkeeping.
Right.
I took some easy credits.
Okay, right.
But it was the history class.
That you really magnetized. Yeah. That's beautiful.
Yeah. And so that's where I graduated.
Okay, so then did you go to college?
Then went to college in Canada and studied political science and history, then eventually into theology, and started off my adult life as a minister as well.
I was going to ask you became a minister.
Became a minister, and it didn't... And I also was pastor of I was interim minister at a church on an island called Salt Spring Island off the west coast of Canada.
See, now, let me just say this, Lowell. Being a father and having a son who is older than you were at that time, I know how your father had to feel. You chose his profession after all of us hope we're doing our best when we're raising our children. We don't know. We never know if we know it. But what you did for him then, his first son, I mean, you gave him a pride that he could have left then and he would have been just fine as he could be.
He was very happy.
Am I right?
He was very,
Am I right?
Very happy indeed.
Yeah, my son makes me feel like that now. My oldest.
How old is he?
He's 36.
Oh, okay.
He'll be 37 on Christmas.
Right.
All four of my sons make me feel so proud.
Yeah.
But it's beautiful if you get the first. You know the rest will follow. It makes you feel pretty good. But it's nice when your first does because they're the closest to you.
Yeah.
They spend more time with you.
Yeah.
They help validate you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what you did with your father. That's so beautiful.
Yeah. Well, but I didn't last long.
Okay, but you still did. We don't care. You got on a base. You got on a base. You may not have made it home. That's okay. But at least you hit one out the park.
Because I found out as a young minister, I was too impatient with people and their problems.
So you didn't have that skill your father had.
I didn't have the compassion he did. I think I'm a little bit more compassionate now. But also intellectually, I've always lived on the doubt side of faith rather than on the belief side of faith. And
is that still the same?
It's still the same. So, but because I was also, this was the hippie movement and make love not war and flower power. And
but we were at the tail end of that.
You and I were at the
tail end of that.
Yeah.
So
but
we
still
got
the
to
influence
watch it, but we didn't get to enjoy any of that.
Well, you're quite right on the enjoyment, but
we watched it.
But in terms of DNA of leave the world better than how you found it,
I think that's really
that legacy was left. And so in theology, that took me in the realm of liberation theology.
Which I've never heard of liberation theology.
It's out of Latin America and particularly among the Jesuits particularly, but an emphasis on the now rather than the hereafter, social justice, poverty eradication. So that's what really then I I took what I believe was good about my faith in terms of loving your neighbor and service of others, and I just went into the nonprofit sector.
Okay.
And then as I've spent my entire life, and that eventually. So initially, that took me to Mexico, where I flew airplanes for a year, flying doctors and dentists up into the mountains.
Okay, well, let me walk me through it then, Lowell. All right.
Sorry.
When did you get your license? You're in college. Did you have a license
So
prior to college?
I was taking a license. I was working 2 jobs to pay for it.
This is why you were in college.
This was after college. So
Okay.
I won't bore you with all the.
No, but get me to it.
It was a little bit of a little patchwork quilt here, but I devoted my time to get my license, worked 2 jobs, and I can't, because I took a break from college and went back again, so it may have been an in-between period, but then I was working in a sawmill, and then the airport car park overnight, but I ran out of money.
Okay.
So this opportunity came to fly as second pilot.
Okay.
In Mexico, where I could have my student license, but I could build up hours. So I went.
All right.
And
having never flown.
Oh, I had already flown. I had soloed already.
Well, okay.
I'd already soloed.
Wait, in Cessnas.
So in Cessna, 152.
Right. 152, okay.
Yeah. You fly?
No, but I did a little bit.
Okay.
I had a friend taking me up, and I never did, but I want to. I still want to.
Yeah.
I don't think it's too late. I can still say. Anyways.
Yeah. There was a 152, and then Mexico was a Cessna 182.
Okay.
And also Cherokee Piper.
Right.
And we would fly doctors and dentists up in the mountains. And one of my childhood dreams was to fly airplanes. Well, the year in Mexico, basically bush flying and getting sick so much, I've been there, done that. I didn't need to do it anymore after that.
Tired of that.
I was okay.
No. Dysentery or?
Oh, well, I got hepatitis. Okay. I got typhoid, but also just because we were landing on grass strips, and one grass strip in the mountains was kind of L-shaped on a hill. So, and after I left, my friend with the Cherokee Piper flipped his airplane on that very strip. He survived it. But I just, it was an adventure flying for a year in the mountains of Mexico, and that was enough. That's called never-ending adventure.
What made you decide to start writing?
Again, the childhood dream, and it was a rather romantic notion to be like Somerset Maugham.
But who had you read that you made you? Or were you a reader?
I was a reader. Yeah, although difficult reading.
I thought
so. It was part of the disorder.
Right. It took you a long time to read.
But I never learned how to speed read. Okay. I was taught technique in that. But I like. I guess because of my disorder, words fascinated me. And that's why I wanted to live in England, because we lived there 13 years. Words, even elementary students in England have a exquisite use of the English language. They use words precisely.
They do.
Whereas in North America, particularly Canada, I can't speak for, can we bend words into the meaning we want them to have? I think
America's could be accused of doing that quite a bit too.
Right. So I'm attracted to word craft.
Right.
And I would say I'm not a good writer, but I'm a lucky writer, because I've been published, now it will be my 10th time. None of them bestsellers. That's okay, but I always sold enough books for my publisher to give me another contract.
Well, that's beautiful. So tell me, so when you got into nonprofit, what was the first one that you got into that you actually felt? I mean, you told me the one where you did for Haiti. I understand. That was your first time.
Well, then there was the Mexico one, which was an independent one. But the NGO I've been involved with since the late 70s in a variety of ways is Hope International Development Agency. And I went to Thailand with them, worked in the refugee camps. I was staff in Canada. I helped start it in the UK. And then when I moved to Japan, my colleagues in Canada asked me to come back and work for them full-time again there. I said, no, I promised my wife I'd move back to Japan with her. That's another story. But I'll see if I can raise a bit of money here. This was in 1999. We moved here in 1997. And so...
Have you never lived here before?
I had never lived here before. My wife was born and raised here.
And you met her?
She was the daughter of Canadian missionaries.
Okay.
from the same church my father was connected with.
So
So they were best friends.
From what time? How old were you when they became best friends?
Neither of us were born yet.
So wait, so you knew her growing up?
I knew her growing up. She's 5 years younger.
Okay.
So whenever they came home from Japan on, as they called it, furlough, which is a military term as well, which was every 4 or 5 years, they would come and stay with us in the church manse, and my brother and her would play together, and we always thought that they would grow up and get married. And then she moved back, and she was 18, and she looked different.
And you said, guess what?
I beat my brother up, and they're still best friends to this day. They're like brother and sister.
Your brother didn't just get married?
No, that was my son that just got married.
Your son that just got married, okay.
Yeah.
And that's your oldest son?
That's my younger son.
Your oldest one's already married?
Yeah, oldest one's married, Ryan. He works for RGF Executive, and proud of him. And I have a grandson, and he married a beautiful Filipina girl called Marie Chris, and we were with them for the weekend. And then my younger son, Mackenzie's a film director, and he married, the girl he married was working here at TAC at the time. She was in the French restaurant upstairs or something. And,
what's her name?
Hitomi Yoshimura.
Hitomi.
This was now 10 years ago, so it may have been while you were president.
Yeah.
In fact, I'll ask her later.
Yeah.
I think she actually.
When did she start? She'd been here, right, for a while.
I don't know how long, because I didn't know her. That's when he met her, is when she was working here.
At the French restaurant. You mean on this floor? You're not the French restaurant.
I guess so.
On Chops.
Yeah. Okay.
And Chops, the steak restaurant.
Right.
Yeah. Front. Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah. So both boys are neither followed in my footsteps. They're both very different, but we're a close family.
I bet they are.
And I'm proud of them both.
Yeah. Did your wife work at all? Did she decide?
She's in the wedding business.
Okay.
In Nagoya. She growing up here, she worked as a model and in media, and she still does that. So when we moved back here, she reconnected with her agent. If you've heard the Mazda commercial, the voice that goes zoom zoom, that's my wife's voice.
Her claim to fame.
Her claim to fame. She's the zoom zoom girl.
Like that.
But she loves it, and she's involved in the wedding business in Nagoya.
Well, I know. Did you want to have boys? Did you want to have girls, or did it really matter?
It didn't really matter. I don't think we ever discussed that.
But did you want 2, 3, 4 kids? Did you decide about that?
We had we have 3 boys.
Oh, I thought you had 2. Okay, I'm sorry.
That's fine, and what I'm about to say is not meant to arouse sympathy nor bore with the details. But our first son died.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
And that was a faith-altering incident in my life particularly, and that's probably when that's when the concept of mystery became part of my faith lexicon. Mm-hmm. That there's just. Because I had people saying, because he only lived 3 days, we thought he was a healthy baby when he was born, and turned out he had a heart deformity. And we had Christians praying for him and saying, this is why he died, the devil stole him from you. And I said, but if there's a loving God, then, and a God who's ultimately in control of everything, then how could the devil steal? How could you blame anybody else but God? And so it's God alone I hold responsible. And that's not said in any bitter way. But that just means it's a mystery. Like, there's no answer to that question. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I'm probably now more on the doubts, even more on the doubt side.
Of there being a God?
Yeah. I mean, it's now become a very private matter to me.
Okay,
I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid to talk about it. I'm not ashamed of it. But when I used to be in the business of religion, there's always an element of wanting to persuade people to believe. And I'm not, now that I'm on the doubt side, I'm not trying to persuade people of anything. I just know for me, I have these questions that are unanswerable. Mm-hmm. So therefore, mystery. And I'm happy to live with the mystery. Mm-hmm. I hope what my father taught me is true. My wife, on the other hand, is never, there's never any gray area for her. She's a believer.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, she's confident. She'll
But
see our son in heaven. And
that's very interesting. For her, you say it's not gray area, but for the culture, there's a big gray area.
yeah,
They live in a gray area,
yeah,
basically, and I think that helps them to get along.
yes,
Because we want it to be one way or the other, and they say, no, 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 not necessarily. Particularly when you're involved.
exactly, exactly.
Too many variables here.
There's ambiguities
That's
in
right,
life.
right. That's right. Well, that's interesting. So where do we find you today? Now, what are you the most proud of? I know what you're going to say, but wait, I shouldn't ask you. As a father, I know that already. Well, let me say, what are some of the other things outside of your sons and the wife that you have, I'm sure, that you really find pleasure in, that you think, wow, I really did that. You might have let it go, but I mean, you accomplished it. You could have thought,
Well, without a doubt. So there's, let me say three things outside of family because
okay,
of
right, because
you already covered that.
that's for sure.
That's certainly my work with Hope International Development Agency is the most gratifying part of my life because we're no nonsense. We're committed to outcomes, and our mission is helping the neglected poor become self-reliant. And so the Japan organization, which I founded with a group of others, um, and it has now grown to be in the top 2% of NGOs in Japan. We focused on Cambodia, Ethiopia, and the Philippines. And there's reasons why we're in each of those countries. I now know personally hundreds of people and have met thousands of people who are out of poverty today because of people's generosity here. Because what we focus in on is clean water. And take Cambodia, for example, we help create shallow wells. We cluster 5 or 6 families who are all go through a selection process. People live in extreme poverty. We create these well user groups. And within 9 months to a year, their lives have been changed. In fact, one set of numbers, which we did an audit years ago, typically the families in Cambodia we work with, if you monetized everything that they produce under $150 a year, they're extremely poor. It means they're sick, they're walking long distances in dry season, they get dirty water. In rainy season, they got dirty water there. Kids can't afford to go to school because although schools is free, you have to buy textbooks and the uniforms, etc. But within 9 to 12 months, they're up between $750 and $1,000 a year if you extrapolate it in actual cash income, because access to clean water brings them health, so they're not sick. They now have water and energy to grow more plants and grow their own food, and they're producing more than what they need. So they're selling in the market, they're getting money. The kids don't have to walk anymore, they can go to school. They build new houses. We then get them access to microcredit. And you know, Lance, one of the first things you notice is aesthetically, they now have an appreciation for the beautiful side of life. Well, and two things really. I'd naively ask them the silly question that North Americans always ask: "What's your dream?" You know, I ask it still all the time. Okay. What's your? The eyes just glaze over. Like, is not a concept that's in their universe. It's how many meals that week they're going to have.
Will I make it the next day?
But within a year, they got plans.
No, they got plans.
They got plans. So without a doubt, that's gratifying to my life. Then this next, and so I'm still on the board of Hope. Jeff Baer, who's a member here at TAC, has replaced me as executive director. So when I turned 64, I made 3 announcements at my birthday party, my 64th birthday party. One was, it's time for somebody else to take over the running of Hope. My Japanese language is awful, and it needed somebody to advance us. Secondly, I was going to return to speaking and writing and started a consultancy called Navigate 22, which is all about navigating the complexities of this century with the next century in mind. You know, what legacy we're leaving our kids, social legacy. And thirdly, I wanted to learn how to sail, buy a sailboat, and sail across the Pacific Ocean to the garbage patch before I'm 70 years old.
Have you done that yet?
So I haven't done that yet.
Okay.
So we hired somebody with in Hope.
Sheppard, yeah.
Yeah, and then I started Navigate 22 in February 2020, which was the wrong time to start a business, which then sped up the time to me to get the boat. So I bought my boat, moved on her, and I'm 68 now, so I have 2 years to go. But
2 years
recently,
ago for what?
huh?
2 years
So I
ago
set
for
the goal of before I'm 70.
to make it through the Pacific.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I've recently have lifted the rigidity of that goal off. It remains more an aspiration. So in March 21, I set out from Tokyo on a stress test sail to Okinawa on my own to see if the boat and I were ready to go.
Yeah.
And I got a third of the way, and it worked because I realized we weren't ready to go.
Okay, but that's it.
So I went to Miyaken,
Okay.
and History Channel had already approached me about documenting my trip across the Pacific to the garbage patch. So I had to phone them up and phone up my sponsors because I'm from the nonprofit sector. I didn't bring a mountain of cash with me to this stream. So I had to go out and get sponsors. And without exception, they were all relieved. And History Channel came back a few months later and said, well, while you're, because I said, I'm just going to keep sailing around Japan to get practice, and my boat has legal issues, as every boat in Japan does.
Is that right?
With the JCI, that's a rather kind of niche topic that would be uninteresting to most people.
Right.
So they said, we'd like to follow you around Japan and do a television series called Dare to Dream.
Who, the History Channel?
Yeah,
Frank.
So
are you talking with Frank Foley?
John Flanagan.
History Channel.
History Channel. A&E. Yeah.
Yeah, John Flanagan. I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah, he's a member here.
That's
So
He's
we
also a podcast.
we filmed. Yes, I've seen him on your podcast.
That's right.
So we filmed the pilot last year in Ikijima. We were to have done it on Amami, where I am now, because when I left Tokyo in 2021, the mayor and his head of tourism in this remote port on Amami, a place called Uken, had started following me on my YouTube channel, Pacific Solo. And I only had a couple hundred subscribers back then. And they said, come here, you can moor for free. And so I kind of, although I said Okinawa, in my heart, Amami was a destination. And then I had to abort. So when History started to follow me, we were going to film the pilot in Amami. I was almost there, southern tip of Kagoshima, when the Karoishi, the pumice field that came from the underwater volcano off of Odawara, had floated down and flooded the harbors in Okinawa and Amami. And so I was warned, don't come because marine engines, it's a sailboat, but you need an engine to get in out of port. And the seawater intake would suck all that gravelly stuff in and ruin your engine. So then I sailed up to Nagasaki Goto. We were going to film there, and then Omicron went on the rise. I arrived 4 days before the film crew, and the film crew was about to fly down, and the mayor there said, don't come, you're not allowed.
Right.
So then I went to Ikijima and nearly sunk getting there. I had to be rescued by the Coast Guard.
Your boat actually capsized?
No, it started to fill with water. I encountered under the surface garbage that got entangled. I was motor sailing just after sunrise. This is January. I'd left port at 5 a.m. in the morning to beat a storm to Ikijima. Anyways, so I was to be rescued by the Coast Guard, and eventually, once the boat was repaired, we filmed the pilot in Ikijima. And they aired the pilot last year, and now we're doing a full season one called Dare to Dream. And so that leads me to say that because I'm not from the nonprofit sector, I had to make this hobby a business.
I see.
And Harry Hill is one of my best friends, formerly of Shop Japan, now UFC Gym, and one of my top sponsors. He's one of the first one who said, Lowell, to be sustainable, you need to make a business out of this. So my YouTube channel, the last book I'd written was called Never Too Late. Hope I didn't.
Yes, you did right then.
Yeah. It was called Never Too Late. And I started to reread my own book as my manual. And then a lot of my followers began to call themselves Never Too Laters. And so I was being asked for advice on this and that, and everything from how do you navigate fear to how do you, before I hit 1,000 subscribers, I had raised $100,000 cash in sponsorship. So I was being asked by other sailing channels, how do you do that? And it's the only thing I know how to do is raise funds, because I've been doing it since I was 12.
Okay, so I was going to say, how you raised it? You told them, okay, there's a fee to doing this, to give me this information?
Well, it's like I've organized almost 100 charity galas with Hope in 9 different cities on 3 continents. We just had 2 last weekend, one in Singapore, one in Osaka, both at the Conrad on the same night. Okay. And so, but when I got into the sailing world, okay, you know, what's the real estate that's available for signage? And so I went to yacht races, and I just like you do for the ACCJ gala, you get your tiers and you get your table placement and stuff like that. So as a result, I started a business called the Never Too Late Academy, and that's bringing fulfillment. I had to go out and get investors, so I got a group of angels together, 7 altogether, including my 2 sons, and Harry's one of them, and Mike Elfond, who you know, is one of them, and Doug Hymas, who you think is one of the, and Paul Dupuis. They're all co-founders. Wow, yeah, they're all involved with me, and we've just closing our angel round actually this month, and so now and with that funding we were able to hire a guy from Red Bull who's helping us grow, and because we've, in the words of Peter Thiel or his concept, we did the 0 to 1. You know, we laid the foundation. We have 7 courses. We've got on the Academy site, we have almost 80 videos, teaching videos. We're now adding other instructors. It's kind of like Chicken Soup for the Soul, where it's going to be a generic brand. But now we have to get into customer acquisition, you know, accelerate that.
Did you do these 80 training videos?
So I've been the sole content creator thus far, but now we're bringing in others.
Right, but up to the 80 that are out there, you did those.
Yeah. So I did 7 courses, and our mission is to help people everywhere acquire the courage and the tools to realize high-stake dreams. And so the courage is the inspirational. So there's a lot of just inspirational stuff. You're very good at, and then there's the tools where Doug Hymas goes through in one of the courses. Okay, if you're using your own money, this is how you mitigate risk, or how do you protect your own money. And Harry does something on marketing and brand alignment, and he complements about how do you go out and get sponsors. And one of our poster child students, a young couple, they were involved in a group coaching through the academy last year, and a dream similar to mine. And I took them through my sponsorship coaching series with 4 others. And their very first appointment, which they had me join by telephone, they walked away with a $250,000 cash sponsorship deal, which is more than twice of what I got. And now that money's in their bank account, and they're funding their dream. So it's the only thing, and I don't say this with any overconfidence, the only thing I guess I have a comfort zone in is how do you create a community around a cause. And in fact, a speaking agency has just signed me in India, wanted me to come to India and speak, because they approached me and said, this is what we think you are good at. And some of my clients in Navigate 22 approached me the same. Like one gentleman, he had a group of 15 investors on a big project in another country. And he said, Lowell, what I've noticed about you is with Hope and now with Pacific Solo, you seem to be able to build a community around your cause. Would you help me to do that with my investors? Could a disparate group of investors? But that just stems from a commitment to authenticity and integrity.
That's what it takes.
And don't burn bridges. Make friends. And in fundraising, I've learned when I've trained other fundraisers, you know, ask the question, be clear with it, but respect the answer.
That's right.
We're not trying to sell somebody
That's
something.
Right. They want to do it.
And listen carefully, because their answer may leave room open for you to where they want to help, but ultimately respect. But even if the answer is no, keep them in the community.
That's right. You have to.
Yeah.
That makes me think of how I've gotten into a lot of the positions I've gotten into, particularly to start off at Sacred Heart. Sister Sheehy was not going to let me have my gymnastics program there.
Right. Okay.
Took me 3 years because I'd always come back. And she'd say, I thought I told you no, young man. I said, but that was last year and things could have changed.
Right.
So finally she said, you are the most tenacious young man I've ever met. You can run your program here.
Right.
And we had it ever since. Always there. So you're right about that, Lowell. Let me ask you this. The way I like to end the program, because you've done so much, and I'm sure I'm going to have you on a couple of times so we can go through a lot more. If you could go back in time, now you might have seen the podcast and know this is coming. Maybe you don't. But if you could go back in time, knowing what you know now, and you could speak to the younger Lowell, how old would he be, and what advice would you give him?
The phrase that comes immediately to mind, and it's a mantra, is don't give up.
How old would he be when you tell him that?
Well, see, you're... so that brings me right back to my childhood. And the eyes kind of moisten because those were dark moments of feeling like the misfit dreamer. And hence the title of the part one of this next book. And back then, I was probably I was a believer in never in a million years. And now I'm a believer in it's never too late. And perseverance, and what's his name? I forget his name now. A British writer who uses the word superpower to describe the ability to experience discomfort is a superpower. And I think that's what I learned early on. And perseverance, I think, is a muscle that grows stronger with age. But I think I'm glad I never gave up. And that's the voice I did hear back in my primary. So it probably would be, now, if there were these particular moments where I made foolish mistakes and bad decisions, at that moment I said, don't do that, do this. But no, I think I was just kept on whispering to that young boy. Don't give up.
Thank you so much. I want to thank all of you for watching this podcast. Make sure you press like and subscribe. And never forget, it's all unknown, so continue to reach for the stars.
Because you're too blessed to be stressed.